Go. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm the events host and coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. Thanks for joining us this evening, taking time out on a Friday night. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we're located in Portland, Oregon, in Multnomah Village. We've been around for 42 years now, and we're still plugging along. Hold on, I'm gonna admit people here into the room, including my wife. Our store is currently closed to browsing, but staff are at the store every day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. to answer phones and reply to emails. They love to hear from people looking for book recommendations. That's the thing that as booksellers that we miss the most during these times, is all those wonderful face-to-face interactions. But you can give us a call or email us, and we would love to hear from you that way and talk virtually about books. Also, our website is always open, annieblooms.com. Day or night, you can shop there. We offer curbside pickup, local delivery within 3 miles, and various shipping options. Let's see, so we have some great events coming up just to close off our event season, which ends the middle of November. So next Thursday, we have Ashley Sweeney in conversation with local author Ellen Nottbohm. And on Tuesday, 11/10, we have local author Ellen Michelson with another local author, Natalie Serber. That should be great. And we are also partnering with Literary Arts for this year's Portland Book Festival, which will be all online. We're an official bookseller for the event. So we've got a stage, as it were. It takes place November 5th to 21st. Our stage has a terrific lineup of authors that you can check out on our website. They're all listed there, as well as when they're going to be doing their readings. Tonight, we are delighted to be hosting Portland author Lois Melina and in conversation with local poet Paulann Petersen. We have both of their most recent books, including Lois's brand new book, for sale at the store. If you have copies already, that's okay. You can buy more copies for your friends and loved ones for the holidays. We're encouraging people to shop local and shop early. We have free gift wrapping. I'm going to put up a link here in the chat so that you can go right over there and pick up both the books anytime. So these two lovely authors will be reading and talking to each other. And after that, there'll be a Q&A session that will open up to folks either in the chat or in person. And introducing Lois tonight will be Paulann Petersen. So I'll tell you a little bit about her before she starts her introduction. Oregon Poet Laureate Emerita, Paulann has 6 previous full-length books of poetry. Her poems have appeared in many journals, including Poetry, The New Republic, Prairie Schooner, and Poetry in Motion, which placed poems on buses and light rail cars in the Portland, Oregon area. She was a Stegner Fellow at Stanford. In 2006, she received the Holbrook Award from Oregon Literary Arts, and in 2013, the Willamette Writers Distinguished Northwest Writer Award. As Oregon's 6th Poet Laureate from 2010 to 2014, she traveled over 27,000 miles within Oregon. Wow. Visiting all of its 36 counties to give workshops, readings, and presentations. Her latest collection, One Small Sun, is available at Annie Bloom's. Please welcome everyone, Paulann Petersen.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Annie Bloom's, for continuing to support our community of readers and writers. I was going to say here in the Portland area, but you're inviting us into your Zoom room, so we may have some listeners, some participants from anywhere in the world. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Full disclosure, I'm an advocate for and a lover of poetry. A lover of poetry who reads a considerable amount of prose, and probably not surprisingly, I'm particularly drawn to, moved by poetic prose, prose rich in imagery, rich in figurative language, rich in the music of language. Marilyn Robinson, Richard Powers, that ilk of prose. Lois Ruskai Melina's kind of prose. We're here tonight, together tonight, to help launch a collection of Lois's essays, The Grammar of Untold Stories. Lois comes to this launch having authored 3 books on families formed by adoption, and another book that relays her experience of following for a year and a half 9 elite women swimmers as they prepared for the 2000 US Olympic trials. She's worked as a newspaper journalist. She's researched the role of leadership in social movements, and she's taught classes on such leadership at 2 universities. Does that sound to you like remarkably varied experience and expertise? If so, you're right. Lois has worlds of experience to convey to us, and she has exceptional means for conveying those experiences. She possesses the art of a true storyteller, the voice of a word weaver. Nothing could be better right now than to hear some of her word weaving. And lucky us, that's exactly what's in store. Lois.
Oh, thank you so much, Paulann, for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate you being here with me tonight. And thank you to Michael and Annie Blooms for hosting us. And especially thank you to all of you who are appearing like postage stamps on my screen here. I really appreciate you coming out at the end of a long week at a time when I think our minds are on a lot of different things. And hopefully we can have a little bit of distraction from some of that for the next hour. And especially thank you to those on the East Coast who had to nap so that you could be with us tonight. The book is a collection of 16 personal essays, and I've organized them into 3 sections: family, work, and home. I'm going to begin by reading from the last essay in the book, which asks us how we know when we are home. The scent of water. Vox rhymes with hawks, but these are swifts, the smallest of swallow-like birds. End of summer, the swifts trek south, Oregon, Central America, Venezuela. Picture them, backs of gray and brown feathers, sickle-shaped wings, cigar-shaped bodies the length of my middle finger, weight 1/2 ounce, the heft of a pair of maple samura, wing seeds that fly like helicopters. The family name for swift is derived from the Greek word apous, without legs, because the swifts fly continuously, not stopping to eat, even copulating in the air. They rest only when nesting, incubating eggs long and white, and at night, roosting in the hollows of old-growth snags and in chimneys like the one at Chapman Elementary School in Portland, Oregon, the city that is now my home. One evening in mid-September, my husband and I joined hundreds of others spreading blankets and setting up low camp chairs on the grassy hillsides of the Chapman School grounds, waiting for the spectacle of some 30,000 birds swooping into the flue. In between sips of white wine and tastes of chicken salad, we scanned the sky for the first sign of the birds. What at first appeared to be an unorganized flock became increasingly ordered with each pass they made of the chimney. We cheered like soccer fans when one of the swifts broke away to chase off an opportunistic hawk circling overhead. Then, just at dusk, they dropped into the opening one by one, and we joined the rest of the spectators in a single exhale. Oh. The birds have returned to that smokestack each September for almost 40 years. Like an old man might pull into the same family-run, low-slung motel year after year, with its faux wood paneling smelling of cigarettes and pine sol, the car parked right at the door marked with a single digit. There are more modern motels, more modern chimneys. Chapman's furnace has been replaced. The original brick one there only for the birds now, stabilized with wires. Even an earthquake won't shake them loose from this ritual, this return, the call to come home. Homing, says naturalist Bernd Heinrich, is the search for our own good place, a nest suitable for raising our young, and the surrounding territory that supports that endeavor, and the orienting and ability to return if we are displaced. When our daughter was 18 months old and our son still a longing, my husband and I bought 56 acres of bare, hilly farmland because when we stood on the slope where we planned to build a house, we imagined hundreds of yellow pine defining the border, a pond where geese would stop on their migratory journeys and where the croak of bullfrogs would echo off the hills. We saw an orchard with apples, peaches, plums. The farm was a dream formed when my husband was in medical school, and one of his professors invited his students to a picnic on his land just outside the city. The redbud were in bloom. The frogs croaked. The professor drove a tractor that pulled us in a hay wagon to the creek, pulled us into the dream. We built that house, dug that pond, planted those trees. 5,000 yellow pine, 300 black cherry, a 1.5 acre pond, uncounted resident bullfrogs, an apple orchard. We divided the land into pastures with metal fences and bought 4 domestic elk, 1 bull and 3 cows. Elk because my husband loves elk and because they are efficient animals impacting water and land resources far less than cattle. We didn't know our pastures disrupted the path the wild elk took in the winter to search for food when the high country was deep in snow. Sometimes the wild bulls tore at the fence with their antlers, determined to stay on their historical route, the one their ancestors took long before farms and fences, the one that is written on their bones. But a fence designed to keep something in is also effective in keeping that something out. The wild elk gave up and walked along the outside of the fence until they could again locate the markers, find the scent that put them back on their way to their winter home, where generations had found food and safety. Christmas, 1996. I woke first to the filtered light that said snow had fallen overnight. I went downstairs and piled kindling in the wood stove, crunched newspapers, laid logs of tamarack, lit a match. Standing in front of the stove, letting it warm me, I looked out the front windows. Snow continued to fall like stardust. 3 elk pawed the snow down to the grass. My breath caught for a moment at these 3 reindeer relatives appearing on our front lawn on Christmas morning. Then my chest tightened. The yellow tags in their ears meant these were not wild elk, but ours. My husband's fear of their escape realized. We rounded up the elk easily. There were no historical routes for them to find. All of them were born in our pasture. And while animals have homing mechanisms, they can't use them if they don't know where they are when they start out. That year's calves, 6 months old, had not followed the rest of the herd through the gate that had been left open. Their scent beckoned the adults, reminded them that home is where it is safe to raise your young. From second-floor windows in our house, we could see beyond the front yard and down the hill to a pond the size of a football field, surrounded by cattails. In the spring, Canada geese nested in boxes my husband built, planted at the edge of the pond and filled with hay. We watched for signs the eggs had hatched, saw fluffy goslings pushed by their mother between the slats of the goose box, land in the water. They followed their parents in a downy parade into the high grass, a safe harbor from predators until the chicks could fly. We believed they would return one day with their mates to raise their own goslings. In the fall, when the tamarack across the road yellowed, Dozens of geese landed each night at dusk, rested on the water overnight, sometimes close to 100. I heard them again just before dawn, the signal for me to go to the window. I imagined them negotiating with one another about the direction they would take off on for the next leg of their migration. And just as the sun rose above the eastern horizon, they would lift off as one, still chattering, their wings banging against the air with the effort to raise their heavy bodies. Picture one. Back of brown feathers, black neck, white chin strap, wingspan as wide as I am tall, each bird the weight of 250 box swifts. A few hardy geese hung around all winter. I never wondered why, but perhaps they had malfunctioning migratory mechanisms, had been displaced and no longer knew the way home. One night, when a long period of sub-freezing temperatures without snow or wind created ice smooth and deep, we walked down the hill to the pond, skates slung over our shoulders, mother, father, daughter, son. I'd learned to skate on just such a pond, on a golf course near our house, my father holding my mittened hand. That night, the moon was full, the sky cloudless, but fog collected in the curve of the land where the pond was. We circled in the filtered light, able to see only a few feet, but knowing the edges, as though skating in a dream. I crossed my outside leg over my inside to make a turn, and there in front of me was a family of geese, setting on the ice, heads tucked under wings. I skated around them, trying not to disturb their rest. The pond was their home. During my son's adolescence, when he ignored parental warnings about dangers, rejected guidance, safety, us, I held on to the memory of that night, the lightness I felt gliding on narrow blades across water that had become solid when crystals bonded to create a seamless surface, the ease of it, the trust. So when, at dusk on a spring day just before he turned 16, my son called to me from his second floor bedroom in what sounded like his 8-year-old voice, "Mom, the geese are back." I felt a certainty settle in my chest. He would return too.
Wonderful. Well, you have just read 3 sections of that 11-section essay that ends your book. That essay, The Scent of Water, begins with a section on Vox's swifts. And the cover of your book is a depiction of Vox's swifts entering the Chapman School chimney, complete with a hawk carrying one swift away. How is this image iconic to your collection? You put it on the cover of the book. Talk to us about that.
Well, I'll show the cover too, because I really love the cover. I was so happy with it. The drawing is a print by a Portland artist, Roger Peet, and it relates obviously to the essay I just read, but it also relates, I think, to the title of the book. I think many of the essays in this book are in some form or another about creating order out of chaos. And the title of the book, The Grammar of Untold Stories, is also the title of an essay in the book, in which I'm trying to make sense out of a story that I only have bits and pieces of relative to my grandmother. And also an ethical question of, can I tell this story that she had never told? Particularly if I'm trying to piece it together on my own. So I think of grammar as the structure that we use to make sense of words, and stories, the structure that we use to make sense of events. And so in a lot of ways, every story is about creating some kind of order out of chaos. And so I thought the cover spoke to that really beautifully.
So that order out of chaos is finding one's way home. Is that order? then? Is that somehow pulling some or being able to take some sort of order out of chaos to find your way home?
I think so. I mean, I think it can be. Certainly we all have different experiences of home, but I think that is something we strive for, is a place where we have that sense of the world settling, and this is where we can be at peace amidst all of the chaos of the day, the chaos of the world.
Yeah. Well, and I have to make another disclosure to people, and that is earlier I talked or tried to talk Lois into reading 2 more sections from The Scent of Water for us, and she agreed, so I hope she'll do that right now.
I will. So this is continuing from the place where I just left off. Deuterium, heavy hydrogen, an isotope that marks a dragonfly's place of birth. Most of the hydrogen atoms that bond with oxygen to make up water have only a proton on their nucleus, but a small fraction also have a neutron. This is what makes it heavy. It's called deuterium because it has about twice the mass of hydrogen, although the origin of the word deuterios means second place. Every ocean, lake, river, pond contains a known amount of deuterium based on its latitude. The amount of deuterium in rain falling in the Bahamas differs predictably from that in snow falling in Bismarck, North Dakota. Some think all the deuterium came from comets. When a dragonfly nymph hatches, it soaks up the deuterium of its first home, taking the stuff of shooting stars into the segments of its abdomen, the wing buds on its thorax. The water the insect is born into becomes part of its tissue forever, carried in the body like the one that flits across the surface of the water where I kayak. My boat, the shape of a dragonfly, my paddle moving like wings. By analyzing the deuterium in an adult dragonfly, wings like the tail of a comet, scientists can know roughly where it was born. But the dragonfly knows it in its body, finds its way back to where it was born, knows corporeally when it is home. The common green darner, black saddlebags, wandering glider, spot-winged glider, variegated meadowhawk. Not all dragonflies migrate. In fact, only a fraction are known to, but these 5 are among the North American species that head south in the fall. They leave what has been their home, but is not their birthplace, when cold weather makes their habitat unable to sustain life, to provide protection or food. They often travel in swarms, becoming easy marks for hungry migratory birds along the way, the survivors returning to their natal waters, where they lay their eggs and die. I was conceived, my mother told me, unsolicited, during a family vacation on Presque Isle, a narrow spit of sand jutting into Lake Erie. She had recently miscarried. Presque means almost. I was almost not conceived. Deuterios, second place. I wonder what I carry in my tissue that tells me I am home. The feel of the wind lifting maple leaves to show their silver underside before a thunderstorm. The scratch of a sharp blade on smooth ice. The filtered light when I open my eyes that tells me new snow is comforting the ground. The scent of water, of perch and diesel and coppertone as I push off the sandy bottom of Lake Erie, level my body, and begin to kick like a dragonfly nymph.
Wonderful, thank you. So now you have read for us 5 sections of that 11-section essay that closes your book. Most of the pieces in this book are divided into sections, and the transitions between those sections are graceful and compelling. In point, in what you just read for us. One section about the dragonflies in the deuterium that allows them to find their way home. That section ended with this. They often travel in swarms, becoming easy marks for hungry migratory birds along the way, the survivors returning to their natal waters where they lay their eggs and die. Then a section break. Then a new section begins thusly. I was conceived, my mother told me unsolicited, during a family vacation. She had recently miscarried. I was almost not conceived. Deuterius, second place. So the laying of dragonfly eggs links to the speaker's own conception. Then you take us back and link us to the dragonfly's deuterium that occurred in the essay's very beginning. So talk to us about those artful bridges, these striking echoes from section to section.
Oh, thank you for that question. A few of the essays in this collection are simple narratives that I think the reader moves through because the time is sequential or
Yeah.
there's plot. But as you point out in this one, I have a lot of essays where there are fragments that I'm joining together.
Mhm.
And some in which there are separate stories that I'm braiding together. Some in which I'm toggling between story and material that I'm including in order to enhance that story. For example, there's an essay about looking for my nephew who had disappeared. And I toggle that with information about what the AIDS epidemic looked like in New York City in the 80s and 90s when he first went to the city. So I feel like I need to have a way to pull the reader through those segments so it doesn't feel disjointed to the reader, because the topics may shift from dragonflies to my own personal story, or there's an essay about my trying to start a union at the newspaper, and I toggle that with historical information about women who were labor activists. So I want to pull the reader through, and I think one of the ways to do that is with these linked images, or sometimes it's the sound of the words themselves or the repetition of words. And I try not to pay attention to that at the beginning. So when I'm first putting material down on paper, I just try to get it down. And then a few drafts in, when I'm ready to start revising, then I start to look at what showed up on the page all by itself. And can I heighten that as a way to keep the reader feeling connected to the story, no matter what twists and turns I take it on. But also not being so conscious of it that it becomes really obvious and then the reader becomes conscious. Oh, she's doing it again,
Well, a bit earlier you said something about when the dragonfly, when I want to switch from the dragonfly's story to my story. For me, a huge element in your art as a storyteller is making that dragonfly's story your story, making your story that dragonfly's story. So this wonderful weaving, braiding takes place where we become, maybe not explicitly, but we become implicitly aware of how wonderfully everything in this world is connected. And that's what you're doing for us. And that's a great gift, I do believe.
Thank you. I mean, I think when I write even a personal essay, I want it to be more than, oh, wouldn't you like to know this about me? I want it to have some kind of meaning beyond what happened to me.
Well, how about you're going to read Wings for us?
I am. So the next essay I'm going to read, it's a short essay, and I'm going to read the whole thing. Some of you may have visited Zion National Park. You might be familiar with the iconic hike there, Angel's Landing. And the first part of that hike is difficult because it's a climb, but it's not any more difficult than any other big climb. But then you get to this narrow stretch where you can literally see down on both sides. It's that narrow, and they have actual chains bolted there so you can hang on. The first time I did that hike, that's where I stopped. It's where a lot of people stop. And I was really disappointed with myself for not going all the way to the top. And I wanted to do it again and push through my fear. And so a few months later, I did the hike again, and I went to the top. And I should say that I was in my 40s when I did that. Wings. By then she knew that when she was scared, she invented stories. The red maple in the front yard would fall when the wind came from the north. The red-tailed hawk roosting in the fir tree would snatch the cat. The acetone-soaked rags would ignite, and the easel and the canvases and the brushes would flame red and then settle into gray on a moonless night. The fear would become fire, and she would write it on her skin. All that spring, her skin had burned with worry. She put ice on it. She rubbed cocoa butter into it. She cooled it with liquor, lots of scotch. She peeled off the scorched flesh at night and stuffed it under her feather pillow. Then she lit a candle and wrote again on the raw pink pulp left behind, a story to explain and soothe. One morning she awakened in the coral light of pre-dawn, certain the maple tree had fallen so hard its roots were exposed, shredded by the upheaval. She sniffed the air for smoke, listened for the click of flames engulfing her studio. Her skin prickled. Panicked, she called the cat. Enough. She laced up her hiking boots. She hit the trail hungover, weaving up switchbacks on a sandstone monolith, the color of salmon swollen with the ache of ripe eggs. She left heavy footprints in the soft stone powdered under thousands of boots like hers, pilgrims who had come to the desert for rebirth, thirsting and fasting and longing. Beside the path, she saw the vestiges of spring's wildflowers, cliff rose and paintbrush, withered in the occasional patches of shade. Her mouth was dry. Her teeth held grit. As she climbed, she licked the inside of her cheeks. She climbed for an hour, or maybe a day, or maybe longer, before coming to a broad false summit, before the trail narrowed over a slice of rock that connected the massive body of stone she had just ascended with another that rose nearly vertically from the canyon floor. Hikers stopped on the flat, sat in small groups to eat their sandwiches. They swallowed water and made excuses for not going on. She stood, looking at the scene as an impressionist might have, the Sunday afternoonness of friends and families picnicking together, oblivious to danger and love. Her breath was shallow from the elevation gain and groundless fretting. She wanted a cigarette. She hadn't smoked in years, but she thought if she sucked on a cigarette, the muscles in her lungs might remember how to expand and fill, and she could exhale the anxiety that settled into the space below her sternum like dirt in the corners of a room. She sat away from the others, took off her hat, and swept her face with her white bandana, which then looked bloodied from the rust-colored dust and sweat streaked in the crevices etched by dread. She ate a grape, took a sip from her water bottle. Something fluttered, a bird, her stomach. Below, the river wandered through the desert canyon, shaded even at midday. She watched from above as a falcon rode a thermal, then stooped in what looked like a free fall. The bird brought its prey up to a narrow outcropping on the wall that rose from the river to the point she could reach only by the slender trail, the point, the map said, where angels land. She marveled at the vision of raptors. She couldn't fathom seeing with such precision, to be able to discern a mouse or a ground squirrel from 1,500 feet. She wondered what would be different if she could see that clearly. After resting on the flat, she stood, hoisted her pack onto her back, and turned to the rocky spine that led to the apex. She waited until the hikers descending from the top were off the single track. At the end of the queue was a woman, her gray hair poking out of a khaki fishing hat. The grosgrain ribbon that served as a hatband held a brown and white striped feather, not a feather that came with the hat, but one she must have found. The skin on her face was worn and sunburned, like that of a snake ready to molt. The old woman stopped beside her, reached up to her hat and plucked the feather, then handed it to her, as though returning something to its rightful owner, before continuing down the path. She tucked the gift between her breasts and stepped onto the bony path. Below, on her left, the river twisting through the valley. On her right, hikers making their way from their cars to the switchbacks. She picked her way gingerly, one boot in front of the other, one sandstone vertebra at a time. When she reached the end, the sweat on her skin felt cool. After the spine, a climb up steps ground by the souls of strangers. She boosted herself over boulders and through crevices. At the top, a few trees sculpted by wind. She walked to the edge. Across the canyon, red rock layered with white and gray. Over time, sediment had been transformed by time and pressure into stone, ancient seabeds to limestone, clay into shale, desert sand to sandstone. The afternoon sun lit the uppermost stratum. She sensed an updraft. She inhaled deeply and stretched her arms to their full wingspan. She knew if she leaped, she would fly.
An updraft. Oh, wonderful. Lois, 11 out of the 16 essays in your collection are in first person. There's an I speaking to us. 2 out of the 16 are in second person. There's a direct address to a you. 3 are in third person. He, she, they, it. Now, Wings, what you just read for us, is in third person. Why? Why is this essay in third person?
That's an interesting question. When I first tried to write about that hike, I was writing it in first person.
Mm-hmm.
And it kept coming out like, Sam and I went on a hike, and this is what it was hard, and it was scary, and hot, and it was dry, and it just wasn't saying what I felt during that hike, which was about the feeling of fear, sometimes for a good reason. It's a big climb, but for me, fear is often just kind of a general anxiety that I carry with me. And when I break through that anxiety, break through that fear, I have that feeling of exhilaration. And so I wanted the essay to say that, and it just wasn't saying it in first person. And I think, so then I tried writing it in third person. And I think it, in some ways, when you're writing in third person, it's a little less vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can get to the vulnerable material because I can pretend I'm writing about somebody else, even though I'm really writing about myself. So I can be more forthright in in trying to get to the emotional material. And I found that the essay started to take on kind of a fairy tale mythological flavor to it. And I couldn't have done that in first person. And I
Okay.
thought that was necessary to tell that story in the way that I wanted to keep it in third person, because it would have been strange to try and tell those fairy tale like parts in first person.
Yeah, because I listening to it, I've read it several times, but this is the first time I've heard your voice read it, and hearing those more surreal, or however you want to describe them, images in there. I can see how that would, the third person would give you a little more freedom to do that. Certainly in Wings, but I'm impressed with the imagery throughout this collection. In Wings, this one image I'll just pick out. She hit the trail hung over, weaving up switchbacks on a sandstone monolith, the color of salmon, swollen with the ache of ripe eggs. What a wonderful image for that color. And I'm especially impressed with what I would call the deep somatic body images that you have in Wings and throughout the whole collection. For instance, she says that she could exhale. So when I should back up a little bit, but she thought if she sucked on a cigarette, the muscles in her lungs might remember how to expand and fill. And she could exhale the anxiety that settled in the space below her sternum, like dirt in the corners of a room. These somatic descriptions occur throughout the collection. And what, in your estimation, you are the creator of them, what is their role in this book?
Their role is really to get to the emotional content. As you mentioned in your introduction, my background's journalism and academic writing, and it's really easy for me to write from my head and be real analytical. And it has been the biggest challenge for me as a writer to try to tap into the emotional content without just trying to describe it, at a distance. And I started working with Lydia Yuknevich, whose workshops are actually called corporeal writing, because she really emphasizes that to get to the emotional material, you go to the body.
The body.
And so I follow her advice.
That's where our senses are. That's how we perceive the world. We move through the world, and maybe a few seconds later or a week later or whatever, we can put, do something cerebral with what we are experiencing, but we take in the world with our senses. So
well,
yeah.
see, you're a poet, so
Yeah,
that's how I kind of take it in cerebrally, and then I have to kind of settle into the senses and be be more mindful of that. So when I write something like Her Teeth Held Grit, it's an accurate description of what it's like to hike in the desert. But I think it also carries that sense of what it's like to just have something gnawing at you, kind of something annoying that you're just carrying all the time. And if you get rid of it, it's just gonna, you're just gonna inhale and you're gonna get more grit. So yeah, it's to try to get to the emotional content.
And I'm wondering, at this point, if Michael has some questions from people who are watching and listening in, or how are we going to?
You have no questions yet, but people are welcome to enter them into the chat or to raise their hand. There's a little blue hand you can put up. You can put up your real hand. You can just blurt out a question. We would love to hear from you. More reading, please, says Martha. That's not a question. No, that's great. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Lynn.
I have a question. I just, Lois, first of all, I really appreciate this work, and I'm so happy and pleased to hear you read this tonight. And just thinking about your transition from what you call, your kind of intellectual work or journalism and then academic writing, and the piece that you were just reading about your hike. I wonder if you objectivize your terror, or maybe make your emotions objective in some way. And if you're trying to toggle between those two things.
I'll say more about that, Lynn. It's so great to see you.
Well, it just strikes me that, in journalism or academic writing where one must be quite objective, but yet you're trying to channel emotions that are anything but objective, right? They're really quite subjective, and they're much more, I would call subsuming perhaps than objective thinking. And I actually really appreciate in the writing of yours that I've read, your ability to move between those two things.
Oh, thank you. I hope that I can do that. And I think some of the other essays in the book do that a little bit more overtly. There's more toggling between the story and the science or statistics or historical material. It's than in this particular piece or the other ones that you've read. So I'm not sure if I'm responding.
Yeah, I guess what I'm suggesting perhaps is that getting to one's emotions is sometimes kind of covert.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's true. And it's definitely true for me, because it's been, in journalism and academic writing, you definitely try to put that aside and not let that enter into the piece necessarily. And so I've really had to train myself to, find these little tricks to get at it without my analytical self taking over and saying, oh yeah, fear, let me describe that.
Yeah, and I guess the other piece that I'm just going to throw this out there in the absence of others asking questions in the moment, is that for women who have chosen pathways or who have been in pathways of more academic or journalistic writing, or even really professional women of a particular age, shutting off that emotional channel has been necessary, or at least has felt necessary. And so turning it on in some way or accessing it, I think is also, there's a kind of issue of genderism in all of this as well.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And and we all know that as soon as you do that, then you're too emotional. And so there's risks to doing it that I think many of us have been taught to put a lid on, or and it feels it feels raw and a little bit scary.
Can I ask a question about this toggling between the scientific and the personal? How do you get, because I haven't completed a hike to Angel's Rest, but I've spent a lot of time in Zion and I really felt like I was there with you. But how do you, in the transition between the academic side and the emotional side, how do you touch into authenticity to the emotional side? You know, how do you know that you're not projecting an idea on it? What, you know, is that, what's the in between for you as a writer?
Oh, I think being honest with yourself as a writer to know that, oh yeah, I'm pushing that. That's not really
Mm-hmm.
what it is. I think it's checking in with yourself. And also I think most writers have a group of fellow writers that they share their work with early on. And they're pretty good at pointing out something and saying, I'm not buying this. But I hope that I can sense that for myself.
Is it something you feel in your body when you know you've hit on the real thing?
I think so. I think it is.
Mhm.
Although again, feel in my body for me is something I have to concentrate on.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Thanks for that question.
Are there other questions? Again, you're welcome to type something in the chat if you're feeling shy about appearing on screen. I'm happy to read
Well,
something there.
I have another question, and if something comes up, Michael, you say so, and I'll just bow out, okay? But
No problem, Paulann.
sort of segueing from what Diane just said, in the acknowledgements, Lois, you speak about essays that began and were first published as poems. First of all, is anything you read tonight in this category? And then talk to us about that process, the evolution of poems into essays.
Wings was published as a poem, pretty much as it is.
A prose poem?
As a prose poem. As a prose poem. I took some poetry classes with Robert Wrigley and others, but I don't really consider myself a poet, and I'm not always sure where the line is. And to be quite honest, some of these, the three that were published as poems, I wrote as essays and sent them out as essays to literary journals, to the nonfiction editors, and got them all rejected. And so I started to wonder if perhaps when you get into what they call lyrical essays, perhaps to some nonfiction editors, they didn't fit their idea of what an essay was, or and so I just thought, well, maybe a poetry editor would feel differently. And so Wings, I actually made a mistake when I sent out Wings, because I sent it to the same journal that had rejected it as an essay, which of course you don't want to do. But they accepted it then as a poem.
Different editor.
So there you go.
That's a wonderful story. Yeah, different editor. So, and are you, I think, and we're kind of getting close to the end of our hour together, and I'm hoping that you are going to give us, as I've seen on the chat room, things come up about read more. So maybe you will read one more thing for us.
I will.
Wonderful.
I will. Thank you. And before I read this piece, I again want to thank all of you for coming. It's so great to see these names, people I haven't talked to in a long time, and some people that I talked to this morning. And I want to thank Paulann for being such an important part of tonight's event, and really mentoring me as I prepared for the reading. And again, Michael and Annie Bloom for hosting. And, you know, if you're inclined to buy the book, please consider Annie Bloom's or your local indie bookstore. It's so important that we keep our local independent bookstores going. I chose this last piece to read tonight because I think that many of us may be focused on the election next week. 4 years ago at this time, I was in Cleveland, Ohio, where I was born, and I was knocking on doors for Hillary Clinton as an out-of-state volunteer. I stayed with my cousin, and when I got done at the end of the day, I went back to his place and we would watch the Cleveland Indians ultimately lose the World Series, like when we were kids. And then we watched Clinton lose the election. And when I got back to Portland, I wrote this piece. And in some ways, it seemed even more true now than it did 4 years ago. It's called On Finding Myself in the Old Neighborhood. I come from this lake, not just water, but the water of this lake, which has whipped Sunday sailors into submission, held the weight of barges heading to Canada loaded with carbon steel, and once belched dead perch onto the sand. I swam in this lake. I cramped in this lake. I walked out of this lake, fled from it, promising never to return. Yet here I am, walking along a boulevard on its shore, watching maple leaves drop golden leaves onto empty picnic tables in a park where there used to be a carousel. Here I am with my clipboard and list of names, canvassing voters who live in red brick garden level apartments and high rises and split level houses, knocking until the skin on my knuckles is rubbed pink. Who are you? Someone yells from behind a locked door. I am you. I am these streets, this neighborhood, this America. I am brick, molded from clay, transformed by fire. The strength of my form hides my porosity. I soak up water, see the salt stains on my face. I can house you, wrap my arms around you to keep you safe. Walk on me, I won't crumble. Burn me, I will still stand. Hurl me through a windshield or a plate glass window in your rage. That's how I fly. I am maple leaf in autumn, late to my beauty. My veins are visible now, and it won't be long before I advance to fragile brittleness and am crushed into powder beneath your feet. But for now, look at my colors. Jade green deepening to black, persimmon, yellow becoming orange, becoming scarlet like the yarn in an old lady's afghan. Beet red, brick red, blood red, orange red like flames. See me glow as the sun gets low in the afternoon sky. Look how the rain forms beads on my skin. Stare at me, at my burgundy tipped lobes against this brick wall that someone painted white in an effort to make it look clean and modern. I am white-tailed deer running down a wide avenue lined with brick houses dotted with cutouts of a grinning red-faced chief. I am wild, out of place on this street where people are awed by me and reach to touch my brown sugar hide, but want me off their neatly clipped lawns where they have piled cinnamon-colored leaves. You don't scare me, you waving your fan-shaped rake. There are still woods nearby where I can disappear into the maples and oaks and buckeyes, even when the leaves have all fallen and the trees are bare. I am clouds, towering cumulus and anvil, blue-black like the barrel of a gun, clouds rolling in across the lake, wind blowing the silver underside of maple leaves into view, pressure changing, deer bedding down to be safe. I am thunderstorm. The noise of me will shake you, and you will look for the crack of my fire in the sky. Wait for the rain to fall against your house. You will feel protected from me. but I will seep into your walls, leaving whiskers of white efflorescence on the crumbling brick. I am rainwater, rainwater and holy water from marble fonts in the vestibule of a church with windows stained with saints. I am bathwater and dishwater and sudsy water from cars washed in driveways on Saturday before the Buckeyes play. I am water in corroded lead pipes of drinking fountains in elementary schools and in aluminum bottles in cages beside treadmills. I am water flooding the storm sewers clogged with fallen leaves, flowing into a creek in a deep cut where deer drink and maples and oaks have been growing on steep embankments for generations. How are you? Asked the woman with a clipboard, skin the color of Buckeyes and a safety vest bright as a maple leaf when I return my rental car the day after the election. When I do not answer, she looks at the salt stains on my face, opens her arms wide as a house, and pulls me to her. I am going home, but I want to find my way back to the lake where it began, before I became streets stained brick red with blood, withered leaves bundled for disposal, brown deer running for its life, before I became the creek that divides this neighborhood from another, before I became this America.
Lovely. Thank you, Lois. Thank you, Paulann. Excellent, excellent event.
Beautiful, Lois. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you all for coming tonight. It's really great to
Yeah.
see so many people here. Again, I've put up the link to the event link on our website where you can buy both of the books. We would love to have your support. We'd love to see you at future events at Annie Bloom's. And thanks again to the wonderful authors and to all of you for coming tonight. This event's getting recorded and I'm going to put it up on our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow if you want to share that with other people who weren't able to make it or watch it again. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.